Good afternoon and most welcome to 816. It's a very rainy February noon. Not too chilly, it's incredibly warm to be the season. Mid-February or early February is usually very cold here in Sweden, and this is anything but cold. Well, today I got some ideas while being away. It seemed to be a sort of a vitamin pill for thinking and creativity. And of course this marvelous book by Rudolf Gachet, The Tale of the Mirror, is very inspirational. I'm starting to understand that that book must be the very best interpretation so far of Derrida, and I see the many mistakes or oversimplifications made by Gayatri Spivak that can actually lead your thinking into the wrong pathways. Well, at the same time they have for me been quite helpful. When you understand the mistakes of others, it's easier to sort of approaching the author, the philosopher. And the more difficult they are, the more help from others you need. Actually, you need to go into wrong pathways and believe the wrong things for a while, because all knowledge is also connected to who you are. That is something unavoidable and actually something very good. An objective, correct reading of anything is never something positive. And that, of course, comes from the very idea of the mirror and the excluding of reflection. Rudolf Gachet uses the mirror to show that the idea of the mirror, or the gestalt, is that you could start thinking that there is a perfective identity or original. Once you see yourself into the mirror, you see the defects that the mirror gives. It is a reflection. It is not instantaneous, almost. It has a distance, and it skews the image. At the same time, gives you the impression that it's fairly accurate. And I think those two things together led the Greek to start thinking of perfection in the way of exclusion. Take away the faults of the image and you will get the perfect, original, not copy, not reflective image. And also, very important as well, there is an exclusion here. It's either the thing looking into the picture, looking into the frame, or looking into the mirror, or it's what comes out of the mirror, out of the painting, and so forth. There is an either-or situation. And this has to do with, I mentioned before, we tried some of these things in the Chatuskoti earlier on. Chatuskoti was introduced in India, I think, somewhere a couple of hundreds before Buddha. We have negation, we have the positive, we have not positive, not negation, and we have both. This is probably a peiron, something that is negation of both existence and non-existence. This is more tricky though. We can't use one corner of the Chatuskoti to understand this one. And I think this is the very one that Rudolf Gachet is pointing to. Our perceived idea that there are only existence and non-existence. And this either or relationship, that is what is problematic. This is what causes the amnesia to start with. This is the reason for us searching full presence and diverting absence. The reason is by excluding either or non-being and non-existence, we don't have the fullness. This is the original lack. We take some things away and we feel the lack and we try to heal it by going more into the wrong way, so to speak. This is very general, don't take this too literal. The gestalt of the mirror is also a method, and this could be very good for you who are listening, who wants to have a method in other things you do, because this is extraordinarily handy when it comes to seeing through a text and understand what it really means. So it's a method, it's a sort of helping tool, but it's incredibly helpful. It opens up almost everything. And as we've seen, this tool has swept into biology. It has been lurking around literature, but not really entered. And I think that is because the insight of Rudolf Cachet hasn't entered into literature. They could do a whole lot good there, because as deconstruction is perceived in literature today, it's more or less a reversal or going into the emptiness of the apeiron. That won't cut it. That is not the whole thing. And we need to understand the mirror gestalt, I would say. I think that's the way to go about it, because it's not something you can just think out in your head without an image. You need a gestalt here. In some ways, the mirror is similar to this dear Klein bottle, showing that the inside and the outside are completely differentiated, absolutely never connected, more different than they ever are in classical physics or logocentric, everyday speak, academic literature. But at the same time, they're also the very same. And that is, in a nutshell, the problem in ordinary, I say, the amnesis thinking of Western, the new Western canon, I could call it. We have the problem of not having enough contradiction in some corners, and we also have the problem of not being able to see them complementary. And there is where the knife goes in with Rudolf Cachet. That's what he's pinpointing to. So this could be sort of a more explanatory model than this we used before. This, together with the mirror, explains why we shut out fullness. We get stuck in the either or position only. And therefore, we don't do the either or position justice when it's needed. Neither do we open up for the both. Let me give you an example here. And I would say nowhere is it clearer that there is a problem going on than in the get-year problem. Do look into that. That's nothing complicated. Check it out on Wikipedia or something similar. The get-year problem, it's to do with true original cause. And that could be changed to any original whatsoever. And that it's not a copy. The story goes like this. You see smoke somewhere. You think that your house is on fire. You come closer to the house and you see that the smoke you've seen, it's not coming from the house. Therefore, it's not original. It's a copy. But it's still, and here comes the not with a K. Your house is still on fire. It has nothing to do with the smoke you saw, nothing at all. They're two different things. And this is problematic in Western thinking. With this, it doesn't become problematic anymore. And I'd say it shouldn't be. It's exactly those kind of problems where you start to look for an original reason for something, and that is a wrong question. It's a wrong question because you don't understand the totality of reality. And to perceive, yes, to perceive the get-here problem to be a problem will lead you into a terrible maelstrom of a sort of thinking that can never ever resolve itself. Never. That's a path you don't want to take. Most Western thinkers have taken this path, and it's only healed, I would say, with the gestalt of the mirror. That will help you to understand the working of the world and the true working of the world. Otherwise, you will be stranding with this being a problem. And actually, when you get to this, that's the end of the road. You don't get anywhere. That you are completely stuck. And it doesn't matter what methods you take, how much you read, how much you try to take in, you will not experience any more knowledge. That would send you completely out of the window. Yes, it sounds tragic, but reality doesn't have justice to it. And I really say that this problem is showing the world could actually be quite mean sometimes, really mean. Well, we should be happy instead that there is a solution and we can get out of the maze. We can, as Wittgenstein said, we can get out of the hypnosis of an image. And I would say that image is so well drawn with the mirror of Rudolf Cachet. And it's an image that cuts through all subjects. I would say that couldn't be any subject that wouldn't be helped by this. Even things like cooking. Cooking is not a bad example. I think the idea of an either or usually messes up sauces. People thinking that salt and sugar, for instance, are their opposites, which they are, but they can also be complementary. And By thinking either or, you will always have meager sources. Poor Greeks, well, poor me as well, because I am an inheritor of the Greek thinking problematics. They got stranded in something that we often call identity. And usually, and this can be reversed and often is, renaming is big thing of logocentrism. That's the actual machinery of logocentrism. It is to rename. And that is when you are stuck, you won't get any more, and then you're starting to rename. And renaming, as the term implies, doesn't help. It's just you have the same things and you give a new name to them. I hope that rings a bell for both of you, or three of you, or all of you. Identity is one of those things where you choose to say that the thing looking into the mirror is the more truer. That's the original. That's also, listen here, the cause of the reflection. Because if you're not in front of the mirror, there will be no reflection. So you have an idea of an anteriority, being with the original. That thing that comes first is actually the more true. You see here, and as I said, it cuts through all. This would also be common sense. Go out in the street and ask someone which is the true image and give them enough explanation, and they will say, yes, it's the one looking into the mirror that's truer. This is needed. No understanding will come otherwise. So we all suffer from identity crisis. Well, the crisis is not what identity we have. The crisis is to look for the identity in the way of exclusion. And then you start saying, I define my identity from what it's not. It's not the reflection. Or just the opposite, the reflection is truer. Something that could be said to be the case in idealism. See here, one can also compare the reflection in the mirror to what many philosophers implicitly perceive to be the mental side of the matter, the spiritual side. The reflection, it is what is spiritual, what is mental. As Descartes said, that is my cogito, that is my thinking. And that is also getting into the wall, and you make an identity between what you are thinking and who you are, because you can't both be what you're thinking and look upon them, except when it comes to space itself. This is reality. It is how space works. It's both separated, it can look at itself, and we don't have to go into whether it's the same or not, because that problem never ever turns up. That's the working of space itself. And this is what one usually feels while reading Rudolf Cachet. It's a relief. And I think that relief is important, because keeping tensions is getting stuck. Is this stuckness that we all feel when it comes to all sorts of thinking. because this makes thinking cumbersome. The separation is unnatural. It is also, without a doubt, completely haphazard. It is by chance. And it will lead you from reality and getting you more and more frustrated with what you do. Let me give you some examples here that could be worth pondering about. Well, a certain way of perceiving the mirror, and that is rather pertinent here. It's a certain way of looking at the mirror. It's not the mirror itself that absolutely gives this gestalt. It did so for the Greek, but it doesn't have to. Mirror is part of reality, is nothing unnatural with a mirror. The mirror have only two sides, and only one of them is the one that we seem to think is correct. And it's usually the thing looking into the mirror. And here it starts. Then we have the estein, the thing looking into the mirror, and we have the apeiron, and that's what's not the existence. And we're starting to get a little force in between the two. We get a polarity like minus and plus on a magnet, or why not on the globe itself, which has a magnetic south pole and a magnetic north pole. We get some sort of force, and that starts the whole renaming process. You rename, and all sorts of philosophy comes out of this renaming process. This is the task of deconstruction that Derrida do later, to cut to the chase and see that the renaming tendency does not help the text, it makes it weaker by establishing polarities that dissolves themselves. And why is that? Well, you parted something that is whole, and it will remain whole. Can never be anything but whole. And that means that the plus and minus will become in contact, and you don't really have a force. True differences can only be found in apeiron, something that Rosen pointed out. We shy away from naturally made boundaries and true things about reality, and we stick to our own perceived differences because these are strictly personal. That's a non-shared reality. This is the true nature of reality, the one that is shared. And that is also when I say there is no knowledge to be gained once you're stuck here and you become, as they say in Swedish, a kuf. You would lose your sense of reality, and your strivings will take you further and further away. A second view, because this needs a lot of use, it doesn't lend itself to one explanation only. Think about the hologram. It needs to be looked from different perspective. Yet another nice of the Gettier problem is the idea you can have something explained in only one way, and that will give you sort of an identity in knowledge. You have 100% knowledge. Do you understand it? Yes. Fill in a square with another with a cross, and you understood the question. Does not work like that. There is no absolute correct. There's nothing absolute wrong either. there is graduation. In neurology, and this is something we learned from Jeremy and Schwartz, is very interesting, and is interesting as a person as well. He actually started out with Buddhism. He's Jewish, an Orthodox Jew, and he actually became Christian some years ago. And I think he understood the problem and why it leads you in the wrong direction. And one of the problems is how thinking established when we are here, because it gets established by itself without you controlling it. Remember, when you have this looking for identity, you cannot observe your own thought. You start thinking. The thinking you have is different from yourself, and therefore your mind has to be something absolutely different. And that's the start of the problem. Then there is no mind, or there is only mind. And what it is, you establish habits, and we've seen this in neurology, Jeffrey M. Schwartz exemplify. And one is with rats. You can teach the rats to form a habit. Go into a little alley connected to one of the cages they are. And once they get to the end of the alley, they will get a treat. So they get conditioned to go into the alley. And then they connect the little treat in the alley with a signal. And in the end, the rats will automatically go into the alley when the signal is chiming. And now comes to the interesting part, and that is something we share with the rats. What they do is they change the treat into something that gives the rat nausea. What will happen? Yes, the rat will, amazingly enough, still go into the alley and get the thing that gives it nausea, because the habit is stronger. There is no mind in the rat that can tell it this is not good for it. And it's the same when you are stranded here and only have negative and positive. You cannot have a mind. This doesn't allow for a mind, because it has to be completely separate, completely other, like in Descartes. And that rids you of the possibility, or blocks it out, I would say, because it's nothing permanent. Blocks out the possibility to have something to look at your thinking habits and say, this is no good. Let's not get into the alley and get the thing that makes you feel nausea. And this is the death of thinking that we've seen in West. We have become more and more automatic. We do not have the possibility of a mind to sort of choose the thinking that are more appropriate and the thinking that we want ourselves. Remember the rat. I think it's such an amazing example that has been reproduced so many times, and it has actually been reproduced with human beings as well. They will actually perform the habits. Habits are what we are made of, and that's nothing wrong with that. But if you take this, then there is no possibility of a higher organizing principle. And you can no longer see your thoughts, and they will just sort of spread by themselves with you having no say in the game. So one can see here how the common notion of us being deterministically conditioned is ringing a bell. And now we can understand why so many people actually think it makes sense that we don't have any consciousness, because they can have no feel of consciousness at all. They do know it. Trust me on that. There's nobody who doesn't at core know that they have no consciousness, even if they vehemently will deny it, because it's an awful thing to think. I would say the mirror is the opening up to getting into freedom again, and this is true freedom. It is a Gordian knot in the case, because what you need to take you out of the problem takes a mind, and this thing blocks out mind. Mind is neither and nor together. But it can still be done. And in almost the same way as the original Gordian knot was dissolved by a sharp cut of the sword. A sharp look into the book of Rodolphe Gachet did the trick for me. It dissolved the idea of there being a problem there. It's not to solve the problem, giving an answer to the problem. It is rather in the direction of understanding there was never any problem there from the beginning, and you get a great relief, a sigh of relief. And that sigh that goes into the core of what you are, and you understand that you have the full presence. There doesn't have to be an absence within yourself, an original lack. And you heal, more or less. You become whole. You become something that deserves to be called individual. And also you got a new power that nobody else has, and that's the possibility, and see through these things, because they are everywhere. These things would give you an instrument that nobody else have. It's almost like the stone of wisdom. It's fantastic. Well, I think that's enough for today. I say thank you very much for listening, and have a very pleasant afternoon. Bye bye.